my only crime. I dared to ask why my parents had secretly drained $80,000 from my house savings to pay for my younger sister's luxury wedding. As I lay on the ballroom floor with blood trickling out of my ear, my entire family stepped over me to continue the celebration, but they made one fatal mistake, and what I did to them next, none of them saw coming. Before I tell you the rest of my story, take a quick second to tell me down in the comments. Which city are you listening from, and what time is it there? I truly love reading through your replies and seeing how far our digital family reaches across the world. Hi, I am Emily Carter, and for 32 years, I believed that family loyalty was the highest virtue a person could hold. I thought love meant swallowing your own dreams so that everyone else could chase theirs in comfort. Growing up in a modest neighborhood on the south side of Seattle, Washington, I became the dependable one. The daughter who never caused trouble, who studied hard, who picked up extra shifts, and who quietly absorbed every burden the family handed her. To the neighbors, we looked like a perfectly ordinary household. Behind our front door, however, an invisible hierarchy controlled everything. At the very top of that hierarchy sat my younger sister, Madison. She was the golden child, the pretty one, the baby of the family whose every whim was treated like a royal decree. My mother, Diane, worshipped her. My father, Frank, indulged her. Madison never held a job for longer than 4 months, never paid a single bill, and never faced a consequence in her entire life. Then there was me. As the older daughter, I was simply expected to be useful. My achievements were never celebrated. They were treated as resources the family was entitled to spend. I became a registered nurse at 23, working brutal 12-hour shifts in the intensive care unit of a major Seattle hospital. The work was exhausting, but I loved it and I was good at it. From my very first paycheck, my parents expected contributions. It started small. A share of the groceries here, a utility bill there. But over the years, those contributions hardened into obligations. By the time I was 27, I was covering my parents' car insurance, their cell phone plan, half of their property taxes, and an endless parade of so-called emergencies that always seemed to involve Madison. A shopping spree she could not pay off, a vacation she charged to a credit card, a lease she broke when she got bored of an apartment. Through all of it, I held on to one private dream. I wanted a home of my own, a small condo with a view of the water, a place where my name was on the deed and nobody could knock on my door demanding a check. For 9 years, I sacrificed for that dream. I skipped vacations. I drove a 12-year-old sedan with a cracked dashboard. I packed the same sad turkey sandwich for almost every shift while my coworkers ordered takeout. Dollar by dollar, I built my future. By the spring of last year, my down payment fund had reached exactly $80,000. Here is the detail that would later destroy me. That savings account had been opened when I was 19 years old, back when I was a broke nursing student with no credit history. My father had co-signed the account, and his name had remained on it ever since. I never thought twice about it. Why would I? He was my father. In my mind, that account was sacred, untouchable, the product of nearly a decade of double shifts and quiet sacrifice. Whenever I tried to set a boundary, the guilt machine roared to life. My mother would remind me of every sacrifice she had supposedly made raising me, conveniently forgetting that I had been cooking dinners and watching Madison since I was 11 years old. My father would deliver lectures about how family sticks together, lectures that somehow only ever flowed in one direction. And Madison had perfected the art of the trembling lip, the wounded eyes, the whispered accusation that I had always resented her for being the favorite. The worst part is that they had trained me so well that I apologized. I actually apologized for hesitating before handing over my own money. That is what years of quiet manipulation does to a person. It rewires you until exploitation feels like duty and self-protection feels like betrayal. Then Madison got engaged. Her fiancé was a man named Tyler, a smooth-talking salesman she had met at a rooftop bar 9 months earlier. He drove a leased luxury car, wore a watch worth more than my monthly salary, and spoke about investments in a vague, confident way that impressed my parents enormously. From the moment the ring went on Madison's finger, my mother transformed into a woman possessed. This wedding, she declared, would be the event of the decade, nothing but the best for her baby girl. I watched from a distance as the plans grew more and more insane. A waterfront hotel ballroom, a designer gown flown in from a boutique in Los Angeles, a live 12-piece band, imported flowers, a 5-tier cake that cost more than my first car. Whenever I gently asked how they intended to pay for all of this, my mother would wave her hand and say that family always finds a way. I assumed they were taking out a loan. I assumed wrong. It was a gray Tuesday morning in April when my world cracked open. I had just finished a brutal overnight shift, and I was sitting in my car in the hospital parking garage when a notification lit up my phone. It was a low-balance alert from my bank. I frowned, assuming it was an error, and opened the app. My heart stopped. My down payment account, the account that had held $80,000, now showed a balance of $214. My hands started shaking so badly I could barely scroll. The transaction history told the whole story. A wire transfer of $30,000 to the waterfront hotel, a payment of $18,000 to a bridal boutique, $12,000 to a catering company, $9,000 to a florist, thousands more scattered across photographers, musicians, and a luxury limousine service. Every transaction had been authorized by the co-signer on the account. My father. I drove straight to my parents' house, still wearing my wrinkled scrubs, my eyes burning from 20 hours without sleep. I found my mother at the kitchen table, surrounded by fabric swatches and seating charts, smiling like a woman without a care in the world. I put my phone on the table in front of her and asked her, in a voice I barely recognized, what happened to my money. She did not even have the decency to look ashamed. She glanced at the screen, then looked up at me with mild irritation, as if I had interrupted something important. She told me to lower my voice. She said that the money was being used for the family, that Madison only gets married once, and that I should be proud to contribute to my sister's happiness. My father walked in from the garage, saw my face, and immediately went on the offensive. He reminded me that his name was on that account, which made it family money, and that family money goes where the family needs it. He said that I was 32, unmarried, and had no use for a fancy condo anyway. He actually said those words to me. No use. I stood in that kitchen and felt 9 years of my life dissolve into nothing. I told them I wanted the money returned, every cent. My mother laughed at me. She actually laughed. She said the money was already spent, the contracts were signed, and if I made a scene before the wedding, I would be dead to this family. Then she said the sentence that I will hear in my nightmares for the rest of my life. She said, "Honestly, Emily, you owe Madison this. You have always been so jealous of her, and this is your chance to finally do something generous." I left that house in a daze. Over the following days, I consulted the bank, and what they told me was grim. Because my father was a legal co-signer, his withdrawals were technically authorized. Reversing them would require a lawsuit, and lawsuits take time. The wedding was 3 weeks away. I felt powerless, humiliated, and utterly alone. And then, 1 week before the ceremony, an envelope arrived at my apartment that changed everything. It was a final invoice from the catering company, addressed to me. Confused, I called them. The polite woman on the phone explained that I was listed as the financially responsible party on their contract, along with contracts for the band and the photographer. Combined, they totaled more than $45,000 in personal liability, far beyond what had been stolen from my account. She offered to email me copies. When the documents arrived, I felt the floor tilt beneath me. There, on the signature line of each contract, was my name, Emily Carter, written in handwriting that was not mine. My father had not only emptied my account, he had forged my signature to put the overflow costs of Madison's wedding on my shoulders. I sat alone in my apartment that night and made a decision. I would attend the wedding. I would smile through the ceremony. And afterward, calmly and privately, I would confront my parents one final time, with the forged contracts in my purse, and give them one chance to fix this before I went to the police. Looking back, I was still trying to protect them. Even then, even after everything. The wedding day arrived, all crystal chandeliers and white roses and champagne towers paid for with my stolen future. I sat in the second row and watched Madison float down the aisle in her $18,000 gown while my mother dabbed theatrical tears. During the reception, I waited until the formal dances were finished, then quietly asked my parents to step into the hallway with me. My mother refused to leave the ballroom. She said whatever I had to say, I could say it right there. Her voice was loud and dismissive, and heads were already beginning to turn. So I said it. I kept my voice low, but I said it. I told her I knew about the forged signatures. I told her I had copies of the contracts. I said that I was giving them one chance, just one, to make this right before I involved lawyers. My mother's face went through a remarkable transformation, surprise, then fury, then something cold and theatrical that I now understand was performance. She raised her voice so the entire ballroom could hear and accused me of trying to destroy my sister's wedding out of jealousy. She called me a bitter, ungrateful snake. Madison rushed over, mascara already streaking, wailing that I was ruining the most important day of her life. Tyler stood behind her with a strange little smile that I would only understand much later. I held up the folded contracts and said, quietly, that the only people who ruined anything were the ones who forged my name. That is when it happened. My mother's hand came out of nowhere. The slap landed flush against the left side of my head with the full force of her arm behind it, and her heavy diamond anniversary ring struck directly against my ear. The sound inside my skull was like a light bulb exploding. A white sheet of pain dropped over my vision. The momentum spun me sideways into a cocktail table, and I went down hard, dragging glasses and a flower arrangement with me. Shattered glass bit into my palm. The entire ballroom went silent, except for a high, screaming whine inside my left ear, a sound like a kettle that would not stop. I lay there on the parquet floor among broken glass and crushed roses, and I felt something warm slide out of my ear and down my jaw. I touched it. My fingers came away red. And in that endless, ringing silence, I watched my family's true faces. My mother stood over me, chest heaving, showing not one flicker of regret. My father grabbed my arm, hauled me up roughly, and hissed at me to stop embarrassing them. Madison sobbed into Tyler's chest about her ruined reception. Not one member of my family asked if I was hurt. Not one. They stepped around my blood on the dance floor and signaled the band to start playing again. But two things happened that my family did not plan for. First, my cousin Rachel, who had never trusted my mother, had filmed the entire confrontation on her phone, from my calm words to the slap to my father dragging my bleeding body toward the exit. Second, a banquet manager at the hotel saw the blood, followed protocol, and called 911. By the time my father had shoved me into the hallway, 2 police officers and a pair of paramedics were walking through the lobby doors. The hours that followed exist in my memory as fragments. The paramedic with kind eyes shining a light into my ear and inhaling sharply. The emergency room doctor explaining that my eardrum had a significant rupture and that I had a concussion. The audiologist gently telling me that I had lost a meaningful portion of hearing in my left ear, and that it might never fully return. And through all of it, the steady, ice-cold realization spreading through my chest. The daughter who would have lied to protect this family had died on that ballroom floor. The woman lying on this hospital bed was somebody new. When the detective came to take my statement, the old Emily would have minimized everything. The old Emily would have said it was a misunderstanding, that emotions were running high, that her mother did not mean it. I know this because that old Emily had spent 3 decades writing excuses for these people, polishing their reputation while they spent her life like loose change. But something fundamental had shifted inside me on that ballroom floor. While I lay there among the broken glass, listening to the band strike up again over my own blood, I had finally understood a truth that took me 32 years to learn. They were never going to love me, not the way I loved them. To my parents, I was infrastructure, like plumbing or electricity, something you only notice when it stops working. So I decided, right there in that hospital bed with gauze taped over my ear, that it was time for the infrastructure to stop working. All of it. At once. The new Emily handed the detective Rachel's video, gave a precise clinical account of the assault, and then said 5 words that changed the trajectory of my entire family. She said, "There is also financial fraud. I told him everything. The drained account, the wire transfers, the forged signatures on $45,000 worth of contracts." He listened, took notes, and told me that the Financial Crimes Unit would be very interested in those documents. Over the next month, while my parents told relatives that I had thrown a jealous tantrum and tripped over my own feet, I worked with the quiet patience of a nurse charting vital signs. I pressed charges against my mother for assault. The video made the case airtight, and the medical records documenting a ruptured eardrum and permanent hearing damage elevated it to a serious felony-level offense. I filed a detailed report with the Financial Crimes Unit against my father, including the forged contracts, samples of my real signature going back 15 years, and a notarized statement. A forensic document examiner later confirmed what I already knew. The signatures were forgeries, and the handwriting matched my father's. Then I hired a civil attorney and sued my parents for conversion of funds, demanding the return of all $80,000 plus damages. My attorney also sent formal notices to the caterer, the band, and the photographer, informing them that the contracts bearing my name were forged instruments under criminal investigation, and that I would not be paying 1 cent. The vendors, suddenly holding worthless contracts, turned their collection efforts directly onto my father, who had signed as the forger and whose house was now exposed to their liens. And then there was the financial unwinding. For years, my money had quietly kept my parents' lives running. No more. I removed my card from their car insurance, and their coverage lapsed within a month. I closed the family phone plan I had been funding, and their phones went dark on a Thursday afternoon. I stopped covering my share of their property taxes. Every automatic transfer, every quiet subsidy, every invisible pillar I had placed under their comfortable life, I pulled them all out at once. The house of cards I had been holding up with my own 2 hands finally got to experience gravity. My aunt called me from a blocked number, begging me to drop the charges. She said my mother could not survive a felony conviction at her age, and that my father was drowning in vendor lawsuits. I told her something very simple. I said, they decided I had no use for my own future, so I decided they had no use for my mercy. Then I blocked her number too. But the most poetic blow was one I never even had to strike myself. During the fraud investigation, detectives took a routine look at everyone connected to the wedding finances, including the groom. It turned out that Tyler, the charming salesman with the expensive watch, had 2 prior convictions in Nevada for financial fraud, an outstanding civil judgment, and a previous marriage he had never mentioned, one that had ended when his first wife discovered he had drained her retirement account. He had been circling my family's money the entire time. When investigators contacted Madison, Tyler emptied their joint wedding gift account of $11,000 and disappeared from the state. Madison's perfect marriage, the marriage my stolen future had paid for, collapsed in less than 4 months. 11 months after the wedding, I sat in a courtroom in King County and watched the machinery of justice do its work. The jury watched Rachel's video on a large screen, watched my mother's hand crack across my skull, watched my family step around my blood. They listened to the audiologist describe my permanent hearing loss. My mother was convicted of felony assault and sentenced to 14 months in prison with a restraining order to follow. My father pleaded guilty to forgery and theft to avoid a longer sentence and received 9 months in county jail along with a court order to repay me the full $80,000 plus interest. To satisfy the judgment and the vendor liens, he was forced to sell the family house. The Golden Palace, where I had been the invisible servant for 3 decades, went on the market with a foreclosure shadow hanging over it, and strangers bought it. Madison showed up at my apartment building one rainy evening, abandoned by Tyler, banned from our parents' shrinking world, asking through the intercom if she could stay with me for a while. I looked at the little video screen, at the sister whose comfort had been purchased with my dreams, who had stepped over my bleeding body without a backward glance. I pressed the button and said, "I am sure family always finds a way." Then I turned off the intercom and went back to my dinner. Here is the part of the story nobody expects. With my family gone, my life did not get lonelier. It got bigger. The constant background dread I had carried for 32 years, the flinch every time my phone rang, the knot in my stomach before every family dinner, all of it simply evaporated. My hearing in my left ear partially recovered, settling at about 70%, and I learned to think of the quiet ringing that remains, not as a wound, but as an alarm bell, a permanent reminder of what happens when I hand my life to people who see me as a resource. I poured my energy into my career. I enrolled in a nurse practitioner program, graduated near the top of my cohort, and accepted a senior position in the same hospital where I had once eaten sad turkey sandwiches in the stairwell. It was during my mother's trial, of all places, that I met Nathan. He was a victim advocate assigned to my case, a calm, steady man with gray eyes and the rare gift of listening without judging. He sat beside me through every hearing. Months after the verdict, when it was finally appropriate, he asked me to dinner. When I eventually told him the full story of my family, he did not pity me. He took my hand across the table and said, "You were never the scapegoat, Emily. You were the foundation, and foundations do just fine on their own." 2 years after the wedding that was supposed to break me, I used the restitution money and my rebuilt savings to close on a condo overlooking Lake Washington. The first morning, I stood on my own balcony with a cup of coffee, watching the early light scatter silver across the water, listening to the gulls with my good ear. My name, and only my name, is on that deed. Nobody can knock on my door demanding a check. Nobody can sign my name but me. They called me the jealous sister, the bitter one, the snake who ruined a perfect wedding. But all I ever did was refuse to stay quiet while they spent my future and split my eardrum for asking about it. They tried to make me the scapegoat at the wedding, but a scapegoat only exists if it agrees to carry the blame. The moment I put that blame down and handed it back to its rightful owners, their entire kingdom of lies came crashing down. While my mother counted days on a prison calendar and my father signed over the house to pay his debts, Emily was standing on a Lakeview balcony, finally living the life they swore she had no use for. If you want to see more stories of justice and karma, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below to let me know what you think of how Emily handled her family. Would you have done the same, or would you have gone even further? I read every single comment, and your stories inspire the next ones I tell. Until next time, stay strong, protect your peace, and never let anyone convince you that your dreams have no use.